Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yedda Stansel, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Yedda here, as always. So great to be back, to be talking, hanging out, listening, just being in this moment with you, which is what we're going to talk about today. We're actually talking about the 12 questions to guide you into the present moment. And yes, there are 12 questions you can use to guide you into the present moment. We had a great episode. Our last episode, we had Rose here with us in the studio. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, go back and see what that's all about. But it was a lot of fun to be with Rose, and I'm still kind of carrying some of that inshallah mindset and energy into the experience today. It's just great to be able to go with the flow. And that's really what mindfulness is all about. That's what this whole shut up and sit movement is about, is what if we just shut up and sit down and go inside and know that everything we need is right here, right now, in this moment, available to us. That's what mindfulness is. And we're in this chapter that was titled, It's Not About Willpower. That's Rose and I were talking about that episode on the last call together, or I guess we shouldn't say call because this is actually an episode or a show together, but I think of them all the same way. I've been doing so many virtual meetings and talks and shows and workshops over this past year that they all kind of mean the same thing. But we had a great time to sit down and just chat and go a little bit deeper into the whole idea of mindfulness and what that was like, and when willpower shows up and when it's necessary and when you use it and when you don't use it. And in the Western culture, this whole idea of willpower, we think we've got to force everything to happen, and we've got this egoic culture that's very masculine by nature, which is fine sometimes. That's an important thing, to wake up and make things happen. But there's also this softer side of just, this law of reciprocity and receiving and going with the flow. And that's really available to all of us, regardless of what your gender is, what your personality type is, or your style is, and even regardless of what type of mindfulness modality you might be drawn to. Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's walking meditation, maybe it's, the list goes on and on and on of the different practices that you could be cultivating. My message to you and my question to you is, are you cultivating being in this moment? Right here, right now. This moment is where all the power lies. Because if you think about it, there isn't anything other than the moment that we're in. And Rose and I talked about this, and I talked about this with Robin before the show today. Most people, if you walk around in the world today and listen to what people are talking about, they are talking about something that has already happened, and they're just regurgitating that shit over and over. And they're, oh my gosh. And I even know what that feels like in my body now when I sit down and someone asks me a question and I start regurgitating something that's so over with that I keep trying to bring it into the present moment. I can feel it now. I don't even want to talk about it, because that moment's over. Or people are talking about something that hasn't happened yet. Oh, I'm getting ready to go on this great trip, and when I get this great promotion, and when. And the whole beauty of all of life is right here in this moment. Right here with you all listening to me, talking to you in this moment is where all freedom lies. Because it's not tied to the past. It's not tied to the future. It's complete pure potentiality. In mindfulness, they talk about the presence being right here is pregnant with possibility. Anything can be born in the present moment. It can't in the past because it's already over, and it can't in the future because that moment's not here yet. And we could get into a whole other conversation about time being an illusion, but that's not for this series. So we'll just save that for another series of a podcast conversation, because we do live in a world where we do have the illusion of time, and there is past, present, and future. And you've heard me talk about how the conscious and unconscious mind can get lined up and out of alignment, and what mindfulness is. And, and in this part of my book, actually, I talk about a lot of willpower. I used willpower for a really long time to survive. One of the stories that's in my book is when I decided that I was going to join the military. So I was in the Army. And I joined the Army, and I'm certainly no hero by any means. I joined the Army, and you probably remember a few episodes back, I talked about being in the Bonnier Home for Girls. I joined the military because I was in trouble. I had some possession of alcohol and some other party favors. I had been really, really dysfunctional as a teenager, in and out of detention centers. I think this was my third one by the time I got to Bonnier Home for Girls, and I was just detention centers because I wasn't an adult. I was still a minor. And so I thought I would solve all my problems by actually saying, hey, Judge, I'm going to go join the National Guard. So it was a division of the Army. And so it was 2 years of active duty. I'd go into the National Guard, and then I would get all this stuff wiped away on my record, which was great. I mean, I have no record. I could run for political office probably. And sometimes I think maybe I should. And then I'm reminded that's not where my talents lie. But I could, because everything got wiped away because I decided to join the military. And I thought I had made the best decision in the world. I did not know what type of willpower would be called upon me to show up in the military. And so when I got on a plane, first time I ever flew, I flew to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, landed there. It was in January for basic training. I literally had just turned 18 years old in the fall. I was off in this amazing adventure, and I had this job. They assign you, if you don't know, they give you a test. So they had told me I would be a perfect personnel management specialist, which means I'm really good at telling people what to do and organizing people and making things happen. Been who I have been my whole life. And so I show up in the military and I'm thinking, cool, I just got out of going to jail and I took my GED in the Bonnier Home for Girls. So I literally was a high school dropout with a GED going into the military to learn a skill. And I thought, I have made it. This is going to be great. And I get there, it's in January, and all of a sudden, a few days after I arrive, the Iraq War breaks out. And I'm panicked, freaked out, holy shit. We are at war. They wheel in, of course, this is, back in the 90s, they wheel in the big square TV on the big cart with the big strap around it, holding the box TV on there to show us in boot camp and to tell us that we are now at war. And of course, everything changes when you're in boot camp and they're training you to be in the military. And now all of a sudden there's a war happening. And I raised my hand to the drill sergeant and I was like, excuse me, Mr. Drill Sergeant. And of course, this was all a platoon of females. And he said, yes, Private, God, it was awful the way they yelled at you. And I said, I'm not going to die for you or anyone else here. So I need to call my mom and we need to have her arranged to come pick me up because I need to go home. And I remember the drill sergeant looking at me and thinking, oh my God, he's going to kill me. And he lit into me. Now, I had been raised by a stepfather who was a former Marine, so I knew all about someone lighting into you and the discipline, but this was a stranger. And so this whole mindset around willpower and rebelling, and it was completely changed for me. Because from that moment on, nothing about what I wanted, where I wanted to be, how I wanted to behave, show up, nothing was in my control. Everything, I remember the drill sergeant saying, you are property of the United States government. Shut up and sit down. And I thought, holy cow, this is not a good idea. I do not want to be here. And so I did make it through basic training. It was horrible. It was so hard for me because I was not your typical soldier who decided that I had of course my stepfather had been in the military, but I had no ties to the military. I had no hero archetype inside of me. I just didn't want to go to jail, and I thought I could get a desk job in the military, figure out somehow how to earn a living, get a job when I got back, and that life would be fine. So this whole point, so I've got this part of this personal story, as you know, and not just in my show with you all, but also in my book, if you've been reading it. I do talk about education, empowerment, and some entertainment. My personal story is there to kind of meet all three of those in different ways. But I do tell the story about the military there because I didn't have a dream for the future. I didn't have a skill set. I didn't have a belief. I didn't have a knowledge that I would be able to go get a job or do anything. So the military to me was going to check that box. But also, I really didn't think that anything bad was going to happen. Who knew a war was going to break out? Maybe other people did. I didn't know that. And so as I sat there in boot camp, I really started to question, oh my God, what am I going to do? This is terrible. So I made it through basic training. And willpower was a whole new concept to me. Getting up at 2 and 3 in the morning and going out and exercising. And if you were on the last call or the episode prior to this when you were listening to Rose and I I don't get up. I am not an early morning person. But when you're in the military, you don't have choice. You don't have thought. You don't have freedom. Like the drill sergeant said, they own you. And so I didn't have any other choice but to call on my willpower, to dig deep inside of me and get up at the crack of dawn and do fire duty and all these crazy things that I thought, who does this? And I realized at the end of boot camp, they do this to completely break down your belief systems, to completely break down your meaning making. And thankfully, when I look back now at the time in the military for me, I am super grateful that they tore down some of the behaviors and patterns and belief systems that I had grown up with that weren't suiting me very well, that weren't very disciplinarian or commitment driven. And so it was through this time in the military that I learned there is a time when willpower has some value and benefit, but there's also time when it doesn't. And so for this experience for me, I did make it through boot camp. I went to my next training was in Fort Bend in Indiana, and in Building 1 back then, which was where a lot of the personal management people went. And thankfully, when I was done with my AIT and I came back to Richmond, I did not get deployed. I did not end up going overseas. It was wonderful. I got out of the Army. I was done. My details and stories are in the book. It was not an experience and it was not a culture, nor was it a career that I was called to. Now, I have a lot of friends, and I was married to someone who is a military police officer who spent a lot of time defending our nation, and I am super, super, super in awe and have a lot of reverence for those heroes that go fight for us and protect our country in uniform in the military. Actually, as a matter of fact, in a few episodes looking ahead, we have a really good friend of mine who's coming in, who is a former Navy SEAL who had some incredible stories in the Middle East and could have been fatally injured, survived a horrific gunfire exchange, and now travels the world, really empowering people through his story of his fight for freedom and liberty for our country. So I do honor deeply the people, including my stepfather who fought for our nation. I wasn't going to be one of those people. And so willpower for me was learning how far was I willing to push myself, and then how far, where were my limits. And I do love this because in this work of mindfulness, you find your boundaries, and you find that we learn to love our limits. And so I wasn't called to do that, but I was called to do other things. What I really love is my willpower helps me to hold my clients' feet to the fire so that they can make the breakthroughs. They can seek the truth. They can dig deeper. On my website, I have a tagline called "No Mud, No Lotus," and then that's a very kind of Eastern philosophy, little cliche tagline. But what that means is if you don't dig down into the mud, that's where the actual seed is planted, and the seed is planted for that lotus flower in the dark, muddy, murky waters. And in that mud is where the seed starts to crack open. And of course, all plants are this way. And it starts to grow up through the water and then up to the surface of the water. And then eventually the lotus flower blooms. And so the metaphor there is when we see the lotus flower floating on top of the water, everyone goes, "Oh, the lotus is so beautiful." But the lotus is so beautiful because it's anchored in the depths of the mud and the muck and the slime and the mire at the very bottom of the pond. So you have to have the dark with the light. You have to have the mud with the water. You have to have the anchoring in the ickiness in order to have the blossoming of the beautifulness. And this is what paradox is all about. So there's some willpower that's required, and then there is that law of least effort. You know, the lotus flower or even the rosebud doesn't consciously think and say, how do I bloom? It just is. It just does. It goes with the flow and it just blossoms and blooms. So this idea of no mud, no lotus, this idea of willpower for where you are in your own journey around personal development is helping you to understand when we plant the seed, it might take a little bit of willpower to dig in the mud, put the seed in there to nurture it, but we don't keep digging it up over and over and over again. It would disturb the seed. Eventually it wouldn't grow, or it would kill itself. It would get knocked out of the soil. Lots of things could happen. So we have to dig into the mud, and we have to anchor ourselves in that darkness, in the depths. And that does require some willpower. And then we begin to cultivate. And as we cultivate our belief systems, our behaviors, we cultivate mindfulness, we don't have to work so hard because that plant begins to emerge out of the seed. And it, by the sheer forces of nature, it begins to seek sunlight and it begins to go towards the direction of the light. That's just the way it works. So the metaphors in nature are really cool in Eastern philosophies, but the metaphors in nature in general are showing us something else is helping and working here with you that is invisible, that you don't see. And that something else resides and lives in the present moment. Plants don't do things in the past or in the future. Nothing is born or created outside of the present moment. And so I really want to help you to learn when you're talking about breaking free of these deep patterns, and now you know all about thinking, feeling, behaving, you know about how belief systems are built, where they live in your mind, in your body, in your spirit. We had a lot of great research that was really talked about in the belief systems. You know that repetition changes a belief system. You know that theta brain waves can introduce and help you with new belief systems, that energy psychology, traumatic life events, all of these are how you get a new belief system deeply ingrained into your beingness. And so what I want you to now realize is you've kind of been learning a lot about the how. So what's the power of the present moment now that you know, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What behavior am I participating in? Okay, great. What do I want to think? What do I want to feel? What behavior do I want to pattern and bring out into the world? We have to start anchoring in the present moment. And in this part of the book, there's also a great TED Talk by Mel Robbins, and it's called How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over, which I think is great. She's one of my favorite speakers. And she talks a lot about pulling that emergency brake and how the brain works, because there are moments you're not going to feel like it. You know, I didn't feel like getting up at the crack of dawn and when I was in the military. Now, the beautiful thing was when I had a choice to change that decision, I got out of that decision because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life forcing myself to get up at the crack of dawn. So willpower comes into play, as you heard Rose and I talk about before. But when you're thinking about making behavior change, I want you to understand, yes, you'll have to make some hard choices. But what I want you to know is if you make those hard choices and you learn how to be in and cultivate being in the present moment, it's a lot easier to take action inspired from presence versus past or future. And what do I mean by that? If I say to you, hey, tell me what new habit and what pattern you want to create. And you might say, I'm going to pick an exercise one because it's kind of top of mind. Hey, I'd like to start exercising regularly. Okay, great. We can talk about that. But you don't talk about and you don't live in the past or the future when you're trying to make that new habit happen. Meaning, if you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, my body's so sore from yesterday's workout, and you're still living in yesterday's moment, you're going to justify not doing it. If you wake up and you're like, oh, I don't want to get my hair all sweaty and dirty because later on this afternoon I've got to go, to a meeting with so-and-so, so I don't want to do my workout because in the future I'm not going to look good. You're not going to be motivated. But if you wake up and you connect to this moment, right here, right now in your present moment, that's mindfulness, and you say, it's 7 a.m. and I've made a decision to go to the gym and it feels really good to get up and be alert and awake and aware, and I'm actually going to go and take care of my body, you're actually in the power of presence. So this is where mindfulness helps you in day-to-day decision making. I don't care if it's a new habit with exercise. I don't care if it's sitting across from a colleague or an employee and having to give them a performance review. Yes, there are things about the past and the future that get brought up, but right here, right now, if we could see the sheer humanity of ourselves and everyone else, it would radically change how we treated ourselves and other people. So I want to go over what these 12 questions are. So if you've got a pen and piece of paper, you might want to write these down. If you have the workbook, I have an entire section where you can actually write. So order your workbook if you don't. And on the online course piece of this, you actually will have worksheets that you can download because you'll have the PDF in addition from the chapter, but you'll have downloadable worksheets for this. So let's just dig right in, however you want to attack this. But we're going to talk about the 12 questions to guide you into the present moment. And so this is right out of my book. It says, one of the ways you can begin to write a new narrative for your life is by asking yourself different kinds of questions. Questions that you're probably not going to think of on your own as you're just living your daily pattern-filled life. The questions below are designed to take you off of autopilot and put you in the present moment, igniting awareness and giving you the space to wonder. What will this choice do? How will this behavior impact my life? And hey, what might I be able to choose instead? So remember, you might not even know how to talk to yourself like that. That's the value of us putting this together in this book for you. So it says each of these questions contains a pause, allowing you to connect with yourself and your thinking, and to start developing a certain level of comfort so that you know, at least with some familiarity, and it's okay to not know, you've probably gotten to a little bit of that curiosity by hearing me by now, then you can begin to open the door to introducing new thoughts into your mind and create new beliefs on a conscious level. That's really what we're working at doing here. So as I ask you each of these questions, I'm going to give you a second to really think about, how do I want to answer this? Because we're cultivating being in the present moment. So here's your first question. Will this choice propel me toward an inspiring future, or will it keep me stuck in the past? And I know I just talked about past and present, but when we are in the present moment, or past and future, when we are in the present moment, we can ask ourselves, if I'm going to make this decision, is it taking me forward into the future, the vision, the love-based vision I desire to create, or is it going to keep me stuck in the past? That goes for any habit that you're trying to break. If you've decided that you want to lose weight and you want to stop drinking alcohol, hey, you want to go to happy hour on the way home from work tonight? Your first question is, get in this moment and ask yourself, is that decision going to repeat an old pattern and behavior that I'm moving away from? Is it going to take me further towards the vision of where I see myself going? Because you only have the presence and the power of this moment to make a really effective decision. Otherwise, you're going on an old pattern to repeat something that you've been doing for a long time. And the power of the present moment can keep you awake and say, hey, that's something you don't want to do anymore. Let's try something different. So that's your first question. Will this propel me towards an inspiring future, or will it keep me stuck in the past? So you can just make a note of that. And, this is something that I'm gonna go through all 12 of these, but on your own, you can revisit these questions anytime you're in. This is a meditative practice. This is a mindfulness practice to journal, to sit down and ask yourself questions. You might do all 12, you might do one a day for 12 days, but I want you to learn that these are questions that you can begin to ask yourself ongoing. You don't have to have them just in a journal. As you get to be familiar with them, you can pull these questions as recall questions at any moment, anywhere that you are, to find the power of the present moment. So question number 2, will this choice bring me long-term fulfillment, or will it bring me short-term gratification? And I got to admit to you guys, I'm somebody that used to, and I still do at times, I love short-term gratification. The kids that they did research, actually, it's a really cool YouTube video. It was back in like the 60s or 70s, I can't remember, with kids with marshmallows. And if a kid could sit there with a marshmallow on a little plate, you can Google this, marshmallow research. If they could sit there for a certain amount of time with this big, really delicious marshmallow on a plate and not eat it, they were told then they would get a second one when the person came back in the room. Really fascinating to see how many kids could sit there for something like 10 minutes or something and not eat the marshmallow. And the ones that couldn't sit there just gobbled the marshmallow right up. They didn't get a second one. The ones that waited and could be patient, not eat the marshmallow, they got a second one. They actually did a longitudinal study, and they went back to these kids as they became adults. They were far more successful because the ones who didn't eat the marshmallow learned delayed gratification. And mindfulness is literally being able to say, I don't need to cling to or grasp to anything to get away from what I'm feeling. And those kids at a very young age cultivated the ability for desire. They were staring at these delicious marshmallows. They were aware of it, but they were able to hold and contain their experience and not take the short-term gain, but to wait. And then they got the long-term, which is when they got 2 marshmallows. So I want you to ask yourself, is this choice going to bring you long-term fulfillment or short-term gratification? It's a really important question that keeps you powered in this moment, because in the present pause of this moment, you'll ask yourself and you'll know immediately the question. So, question number 3, am I standing in my power, or am I trying to please another? When you're standing in your own personal power, and it is your own personal truth, by the way, you've heard me say this before, there is no absolute truth. So everyone's got their filter of the truth. So when you're standing in your power, your truth in this present moment, and you're anchored to the truth of who you are, it's okay to say, I'm not going to give up who I am and what I want and what I need to make someone else happy. Sometimes taking care of ourselves and saying yes to ourselves sounds and looks like no to somebody else. And so the ability to ask yourself, am I in my power in this present moment, or am I in the past trying to please somebody, or in the future saying, well, gosh, if I show up and I'm really kind and really nice to this person right now, then the next time I need something, they're going to show up and be really nice and kind to me. And I think a lot of us could probably say that doesn't always work out that way. So you want to stand in your power in this present moment and not give somebody something that they want or need that is at the cost of you being in a place of empowerment in the present moment. So let's move on to number 4. And so this one says, am I looking for what's right, or am I looking for what's wrong? And now, of course, I'll take you all the way back to chapter 2 and the whole cognitive distortions conversation. And here's what we're looking at. When we look at things and we find out what's wrong and what's not working, that negative thought process takes us on a negative downward spiral. Do you remember in the emotional guidance scale? So when we look for what's right, we begin to feel and we begin to move upwards in a higher vibration, and we create an emotion that's much more positive. So I want you to ask yourself, in the present moment, when you're grateful for what is, you cultivate enoughness. So right here, right now, if you could look around the room and find 5 things that are working well, things that are going right, you'll literally and radically shift your ability to stay anchored in the present moment. Because when you find what's wrong and you start looking at, well, that picture's crooked and that's got a window's got a spot there, and all of a sudden you constrict your awareness and you get out of the present moment, and then you start doing all types of mental games and you're not mastering your mind anymore. So there's real power. There's another real power in, there's a great book by Ken Blanchard, who's a mentor of mine, and it's From Kids to Killer Whales. And it was all about how to manage people by catching them doing things right. If you want to train a killer whale, do you know what you do? You give them a reward. They got a fish every time they did what the trainer wanted them to do. It's the same with kids. Chore charts, all these little rewards, tickets, gummies, all these things that parents give their children. When you catch people and things doing things right, you expand mindfulness and you expand the present moment. So as we move into the next question, this one's one of my favorites. Will this choice add to my life force, or will it rob me of my energy? When we're totally radically in our present moment experience, it adds energy and life force to us. And when we're not, it literally drains energy. I've been reading this book lately called Energy Vampires, and it's all about the people and the peer and the experiences and the places and the habits that actually drain you of your energy. When you're not in the present moment being mindful, your energy is zapped. So when I leave doing these shows and these episodes and these videos for you all, my energy is way, way high up because I'm totally focused on you, on this moment, on this experience. Nothing else is in my awareness. And so my energy goes up, not down when I do this. And some people have asked me, they're like, how do you do all that and not feel exhausted? Because there's nothing else in my awareness other than this experience right here, right now. And that's the irony of being present. You find so much more freedom and creativity and possibility because you're not overwhelmed with all the crap that's coming from the past and the future that's just piling on top of you. You're radically present and you just are able to push that out of your awareness. And so will this choice add to my life force, or will it drain me, rob me of my energy? Next question. Will I use this situation as a catalyst to grow and evolve, or will I use it to beat myself up? And I love this question too, because there are things just like that seed, the no mud, no lotus, the seed that's down in the mud. It needs to grow. It has to have the water and it has to have the darkness and it has to have some suffering and contrast to break free, to birth something new out of the seed. That's what growth and evolution look like. It's a part of life. It's a natural process. It's not meant to constrict. Could you imagine if a seed or a rosebud had conscious awareness that said, I'm going to hold tight and I'm not going to grow and expand? It would take more energy to fight against the flow of life and the evolution and the forces of the universe than it would to go with the flow of this moment. So the question here is, will I use this situation? And it could be a poor performance review. It could be somebody giving you feedback, maybe your spouse or your partner, or a terrible experience with someone that you love. Contrast is a great teacher to help us as a catalyst to grow and evolve. Mindfulness says, don't use it to beat yourself up. Use it to allow yourself to say, it's just showing me where not to go. It's showing me what I might want to let go of. It's showing me go this way to grow and evolve. Most of our suffering is a gift that is disguised in a way that is helping us to grow and evolve. And I'm saying most of because I don't want to make a blanket statement, and I don't want to step into some people's suffering that I don't know anything about. The majority, and I'm talking about just the majority of our suffering, when we talk about that catalyst that could come from it, most of us have a story of something happened that pushed us to go into a different direction. So moving right along. So next question, does this choice empower me or does it disempower me? Empowerment looks like our body sits up taller and we go, yes. And disempowerment, we kind of shrink down and we go, no. So the question here is, where do you feel? Because you do feel yeses and nos in your body. Empowerment in this choice that you're about to make, is it going to empower you and connect you to the fullness of this moment? Or is it going to constrict you and take you into an old narrative of the past or a worry or fear about the future? So this is back to that mind-body connection. Empowerment and disempowerment, they live in your body as much as they do in your mind. So we've got a few questions left here to go. And the next question says, is this an act of self-love or an act of self-sabotage? And self-love's a tricky one because not a lot of us have cultivated that in a way that's really holistic and embraces the ego. So we think self-love is boundaries and being on the attack, and a lot of people don't realize this. The ego usually jumps in between three different roles or characters. So it's either the victim, it's usually the rescuer, or it's the aggressor. And that's not self-love. What I'm talking about, that's actually self-sabotage disguised as self-love. Self-love is just being able literally to be in the present moment and in your mind, and maybe even literally wrap your arms around yourself and just say to yourself, you're doing a great job. Everything that you're doing a wonderful job. Imagine talking to yourself like your parent, a loving parent or a loving role model would come up and wrap their arms around you and tell you, you're doing an incredible job. And you know what? Exactly what's going on is totally okay. And just keep up the good work. What would it look like? That's present moment awareness, to talk to yourself with kindness. Self-sabotage is, this is really stupid. Let's turn this show off and go hit the bar and have 2 glasses of wine because this is a whole bunch of bullshit. That's not going to get you into the present moment. Now do you see these questions give you a guide? I want to be in the present moment. And then next one, which is kind of a nice lead in, it says, is this an act of faith or fear? And when I mention faith, I want to define faith. Faith is when you believe in what is unseen, unheard, and unknown. Okay? When I'm talking about, is this an act of faith? I don't know what it's going to look like when this is all said and done, but I am going to trust and I'm going to step so fully into this moment and have faith that I'm connected to whatever is working right here, right now, as opposed to live in a place of fear and procrastinate and not show up and not handle things in a healthy way. So am I in faith? Faith always lives in the present moment. Fear lives in the past and the future. Fear does not live in the present moment if you are really radically tied to presence. Next question. Am I choosing to act from my higher self or am I choosing to act from my ego? We've been doing a lot of work on this one. Higher self speaks in silent, still awareness. You find it when you shut up and sit down. You cultivate it by sitting with the silence. The ego is that constant narrative that just never shuts up. So in the presence, silence and stillness and the higher self is going to anchor you with a beingness, not a constant talking, chatter, doingness. So again, where do you want to be? Do you want to be in the present moment with your higher self or your wise self? Or do you want your ego running the show and distracting you and yanking you back to the past and telling you how crappy that person was, or forcing you into the future, fantasizing about when you get to that vacation, it's going to be really great, knowing that it never is. You're constantly chasing when you're with the ego. So we got 2 more questions to go, and I know I'm kind of working through these pretty quickly. You'll have these. You can always push pause. You can write them down. You can rewind. This is the cool thing about technology. This is a product that you can watch and listen to over and over and over again. So we've got 2 more questions to go. What am I forcing to happen here? If you want to be in the present moment, this is why we're talking about it's not about willpower, and all you're doing is forcing, and the ego is charging ahead, and you're just doing nothing but making it happen, you're not really in the present moment, because the present moment doesn't need you to force anything. The present moment says everything you want and need, it's already right here. Just shut up and sit down and be with it. It will come to you. And I know this is radically different for a lot of us that grew up in the Western culture, but the truth is there is power in presence. There is power in pausing. There is power in saying, maybe it's not here yet because there's a reason. And that kind of goes back into when we were talking with Rose on the last episode about the inshallah. Maybe it turns out even better when you just sit with the moment as opposed to force the outcome. And then our last question here is, what wants to be created through me in this moment? And if you forget all the other questions and all you do is you ask yourself on a day-to-day basis, one question: what wants to be created through me in this moment? When I sit down to do the show, yes, I have my notes. Yes, I've got my book and I've written all this stuff and I do this work all day long, every day for a living. But every time I come in to do a show with you all, I literally ask the moment. Because to me, and in narrative coaching, I say this, and this is true, this is what we are taught, and this is what I tell my clients. In narrative coaching, the client is the moment. And actually, I'd say in all of life, the client is the moment. It's not you, it's not me, it's not anybody else that's involved. The client is the moment. So I ask before I film every video, before I ever sit down and shut up and talk and teach and speak and coach and do anything. And even sometimes in the middle of the experience, I'll get quiet and I will ask the moment, what do you most want and need? And what do you want to create through this experience with me and or this person, these people? And the truth is, when I'm talking on video, I don't know how many people are ever going to listen to this. So I'm serving the moment, this moment right here in time. And I listen. And the moment might say, hey, tell that story about. Or the moment might say, you might want to speed up, time's running out. Or the moment might say, whatever the moment says, just breathe, just be here. I've got this. What happens is that magic of presence, I learn to cultivate and trust it. And something does get born and created out of every mindful moment that I ever experience. But I partner with that creation. And when I sit with that and I ask the moment, and to me, the moment is the field of all possibilities, which, goes out into the universe, into the source of all that is, the divine intelligence. When I sit with and I ask, what does the moment most want and need? And what does it want to create through me? It happens. And then what I realize is it happens through all of us. And sometimes with a client, I'll say, what does the moment most want and need for my client? And then the client will hear and know. So it's a beautiful magic around mindfulness that we don't have to know it all. We don't have to do it all. If we could just shut up and sit down and get anchored in this moment, right here, right now, we would find that it's enough. And that's really the whole reason why I do these shows and why I give you guys these tips and tools. As I learned this over the years, I had to learn new ways of patterns of being and behavioral belief systems and structures of even talking like that. What's the moment most want to need? What does it want to create through me right now? Not my ego. My ego's still here and she's working with me in that question, but she's not fighting against me to say, Yedda, this is stupid. Let's get out of here and let's go hit the bar, or let's go to the river and hang out and, get a good suntan. She's right here with me now going, cool, the moment's awesome. I get to put my feet up. I get to chill. I get to be a part of the experience. I don't have to work so hard. It's not about willpower. So now you've got some really cool key questions that will help you to come back into the present moment while you're in your day, in your morning practice, in the evening, even in conversation. If you find yourself in a conversation with people and you hear that all they're talking about is what has happened, or they're talking about what hasn't happened, or they're complaining about what they don't like about what's happening, just pause and maybe silently say to yourself, what's the moment most want to create right now through me in this experience? And it might be a smile. It might be a redirection. It might be some compassion. I don't know what the answer is going to be. But if you ever shut up and sat down long enough and asked the moment what it wants instead of you or anyone else, you might be surprised what you find when you actually get really into the present moment. So these 12 questions get us there. They help us cultivate being there more. The more you do it, the easier it gets and the more frequent. It's amazing what happens to your life when you cultivate presence and you shut up and you sit and you're in this moment. So thanks for being in this moment with me wherever you are in the world. It's such a joy. I'm loving teaching and I'm loving being here with you. And when we come back, we've got another episode coming, and I'll tell you what, the next one, they just get better and better. The next episode, I'm going to actually be teaching you what I think is the end-all be-all equation for all time, all success. So we're going to be talking about the 3 barriers to the present moment. And we're going to be talking about this equation that I didn't put together, but that I found in my research that helped me to understand what are those 3 barriers to success. And then how do I actually put an equation together to manifest more success in my life. So make sure you come back, hang out with me on the next episode. And until then, have a mindful day. And remember, serve the moment. Be in the moment. Ask it what it needs. It will tell you. I'll see you soon. Take care.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. May you know contentment. May you be